Every month, my supporters on Patreon and Maker Support who donate $5 or more get to participate in an AMA. I guarantee an answer to one question, and will answer more at my discretion, so let's see who had questions for the month of May. Josh Havins asks, how would Child Protective Services be handled in a free market? Would it even exist? I don't know if it would exist as like a separate entity, and I think we've all seen the problems with it, mainly that they're completely unaccountable, but if we go back to Murray Rothbard's idea of parents being trustee owners of a child, then it stands to reason that if they abandon or neglect their duties in that regard, then it would be perfectly permissible for someone to do what is necessary to remove that child from the situation and either start caring for the child themselves as their own or find someone to adopt them or something like that. And if the parents object to that and say, hey, you kidnapped our kid, well, go to the DDRO or whoever and make the argument. But, if you're right and they were abusing or neglecting, you should be able to easily win. And they said, okay, well, you did a good thing here. You didn't go beyond what was necessary to make it happen, so we'll rule in your favor. On the other hand, if you're wrong about that and you had bogus reasons for doing it and there wasn't any real abuse or neglect going on, guess what? You're now guilty of kidnapping, breaking and entering, and all the other things you had to do in order to remove the child from their possession. So, yeah, you'd have to be accountable for that. And probably, I think, in a situation like that, you would see organizations who would specialize in that, who would understand more of what was proper abuse and neglect and when it was actually appropriate to go in and do that to minimize the chances of having that ruling made against them, which again is something we don't have right now. So you would actually have an incentive not to just, bust inside someone's home and take their kid if you didn't have a really good reason to. But, and of course, with the usual disclaimer, that's just one idea. You put a lot of entrepreneurial minds to it, they can come up with all sorts of stuff. And this is one of those cases where this is such a big issue. It's one of the first, how would you protect the children? It's one of those issues that everyone just comes up with and says, hey, this is really important. Well, it would continue to be really important to people, in Ancapistan, if we're going to call it that. And so there would absolutely be a profit motive in entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to do it. So Jason Malts asks, do you think money is free speech? Absolutely. It's a couple of things. One is money allows you to purchase the means of speech. Imagine if the founders had said, okay, you have the right to freedom of the press, but government can stop you from spending your money to buy a movable type machine. Everyone would say, what? What are you talking about? Don't be ridiculous. You don't get to get together with your friends and pool your money together and buy advertising where you express your opinion about an issue or a candidate before an election, which was what the Citizens United Supreme Court case struck down. That's kind of ridiculous, too. If you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of speech, and money is a big enabler for that. But I think the other thing is that money fundamentally is speech in that prices are the best and most efficient means that consumers have of communicating with businesses. And if a business sets something at a particular price, they're communicating something to potential customers. By buying or not buying the product at that price, they're communicating something back. And just so much has been written on the benefits of the price mechanism and how it can do so much that government certainly could never do. And it's a stretch to think of even just how in a free market you could set up this kind of communication. Even if you had the company had an internet forum where people could come on and express their opinion. Well, money talks is the expression, so people can say all sorts of things, but it's whether or not they actually buy it that's the real communication. And that's why you get a lot of these boycotts that don't work. This is something the social justice warriors have been doing a lot of lately. They get all bent out of shape. Oh, you sponsored so-and-so's video, and that's hate speech, even though it generally isn't, but we'll boycott your product, and it's a product that they weren't even buying anyway. So yeah, whether or not you actually buy the product is communication back to the business, communication of a very important and much more efficient sort than you can have any other way. Or that corporations are people. Well, corporations are collections of people, And if you get together with your friends and pool your resources to do things, you don't lose your rights that you have. If you have freedom of speech, then that means you can get together with your friends and pool your resources to amplify your voices and say what you want. And so this idea of, well, corporations aren't people, so they don't have free speech, that's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, the other sense in which, corporate personhood is in things like a corporation does something horrible and the corporate assets get punished, but none of the actual people do. So I think one thing is whatever individuals in that corporation made that decision and carried out those actions should absolutely be held responsible. But the other thing is, I do think you would have limited liability in a free market, because you could say, look, this is my storefront, but over here is my house. If I do a bad business deal with you, then when you come after me civilly, okay, you might make a claim against the business, but I don't want you making a claim against my house because I have to live there. So it's part of the contract that any sort of liability gets limited to this particular set of assets. So you could easily do that in the free market. Or the corruption in government can be stopped. It really can't be stopped. It's pretty much inevitable. It seems like if you say money is free speech, you give warrant to moneyed interests who would just buy politicians and influence. Yeah, because there's absolutely no way that would happen otherwise. That's the default, people. That's the default. The rich, the aristocracy, the well-to-do, the great and the good. They've already got the ear of these politicians. They don't have to buy influence. They already have it. What this does is let the small fry, like you and me, get together and have our voice. That's exactly what Citizens United was. They weren't like this, big money, rich guys going out there. They were independent filmmakers making a documentary about Hillary Clinton. They put a lot of their own personal resources into making that, and they put it on pay-per-view. I mean, this was a big thing, because they were saying, they shouldn't be able to just spread it out. Well, it was pay-per-view, which meant that people had to want to see it. It wasn't just being broadcast over the public airwaves, and they had to want to see it badly enough to pay for the pay-per-view for it. But because it was within 60 days of an election, or actually in that case, 30 days of a primary election, oh no, that's not allowed. And considering how long primary seasons go for, and you have far more than one primary every 30 days, that's pretty much a 6-month period or something like that, where you just weren't able to do anything that even mentions a federal candidate. I'm sorry, how is that defensible? How is that in any way defensible? So he asks a second question, which I'll go ahead and answer since there were so few this month. I think his previous one was actually 3 different questions, but whatever. Is there one government program / policy / budget you would keep as is? Well, I mean, they're all taxpayer funded and taxation is theft, so I wouldn't keep that. Aside from that, there are a lot of things that I would probably keep as independent, non-governmental things. Spin off NASA as an independent organization, kind of like SpaceX. Spin off the FDA into a UL kind of organization and make it work a lot better. But keeping as is part of the government, I would probably have to say the Government Accountability Office. Because I do think they do a really good job. I mean, they have their moments where, they go one way or the other. But I mean, they've done some really beautiful things in the past at just pointing out how money is being wasted and the federal government is just being incompetent and doing all these crazy things. So that might be the one, if it could be, not funded by taxpayers, and probably NIST to, keep that, but have it be independently funded, not by tax money. So, all right, that's it for me. In July, we'll look at who asked questions during June. So until then, stay strong and be free.